unable to answer all the questions, we will compile a list of questions and send those out via email. Our speaker today that I'd like to introduce is Jason Ray. He is a CEO at Simply Home, certified aging in place specialist. Since beginning with Simply Home in 2008, Jason has been a national speaker on enabling technology, remote support, and technology-first transformation to associations, state and national agencies, and provider organizations. Jason's work with Simply Home has been featured in multiple episodes of ABC's Extreme Makeover Home Edition, along with many other national publications. From 2017 to 19, he served as a subject matter expert on enabling technology and remote support for Tennessee Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. From 21 to 24, Jason served in the same capacity for New Mexico Developmental Disability Support Division Technology First Initiative. Jason also contributed to the founding of Shift in 2021, the nation's leading education and training platform on technology first principles. Finally, in 2022, Jason helped to launch the Technology First Alliance, a nonprofit organization focused on advancing technology first principles in long-term services and supports. Jason Ray, the floor is yours. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you everyone for making some time to join us today. I know all of you are very busy and you could have chosen to spend that time in a lot of different ways. So certainly honored that you would spend a few moments learning about technology and listening to me speak. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the presentation. As Jason just shared a moment ago, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to throw them in the chat. We will either address those in the moment if they're something critical to clarify in that moment, or we'll definitely save those to the end and make sure that we address it before our time is up. I have about 45 minutes of content to share, so we will have adequate time to jump into any questions that you all have at that time. So again, thank you all for your time today. We are going to talk about technology in the home as a part of our presentation today. I know you've heard a couple of presentations leading up to this one from various speakers, and I'm going to try and not duplicate a lot of what you've already heard. But I do just like to kind of set a foundation when we have some of these talks to really talk about some of the terms I'm going to use to make sure that we're all, thinking about the same things and what those terms mean. And that really starts with enabling technology. So what we really focus on as it relates to enabling technology is trying to think about technology utilization in a holistic way. Really, any piece of tech that creates independence for an individual, where they live, work, play, any area of life where technology can play a role in helping them be independent, is something that can be considered enabling technology. For the purposes of our conversation today, we're going to focus on the home. So while there are a lot of great applications in other areas, and I'm sure there'll be other speakers you'll hear from to talk about some of those areas, we're going to focus on the home today. And with that, I really want to start with this foundation of thinking about the spectrum of technology options. So we're going to talk about a lot of different technology components and ways they can be used to support individuals in a variety of ways. But I really want you all to first start thinking about just the breadth of technology options that are out there. So while there's some really kind of cool, sophisticated, high-tech solutions out there that are fantastic, you don't have to go straight there to be able to make an impact. So when we talk about the spectrum of technology options, we really want that to cover, again, really anything. That can be simple, off-the-shelf technology solutions. I mean, we have a picture of an Amazon Echo here, all the way up to customized applications, things that are really high-tech, more sophisticated applications. But there's a lot of things in between there as well. So don't think when we talk about things like technology first, enabling technology, that you have to jump right to high-tech solutions. There's a lot of really impactful, simple, off-the-shelf technology solutions that you can either start with, or maybe that's all someone needs. I'll tell one really quick story to illustrate that point. We were actually working with a family in Michigan a couple of years ago, and this family had a son who wanted to transition into living more independently, but They had a lot of areas where he needed support, and a lot of it was really geared around different tasks that he needed to complete throughout different times of day. And how they were supporting him previously was all of those tasks were things that he got reminders about from his dad. And this was a gentleman who was around 20 years old, and you can imagine how that went. I mean, being about 20 years old, how many of us want every little thing that we need to do throughout the day coming in the form of a reminder from our parents, right? Nobody wants that. And so there became a lot of tension in that relationship as a result, because his dad was constantly nagging about, have you done this? You need to do that. It's time to do this. And so that was one of the areas where they felt like he needed to be able to do these things consistently in order to have opportunities to be more independent. But they weren't finding a lot of success because dad was still having to do that on a daily basis. And so that was obviously a concern. So when we started talking to them, they had some really grand visions about some really, high level apps and things that they wanted to customize for their son so that he could manage some of these different situations independently. But during our assessment process and conversation with the family, we encouraged them to start small, start simple, and then build up over time to more sophisticated, customized applications. So we said, hey, just start with an Amazon Echo. You can actually program that so that certain times a day, you can have it make announcements and provide reminders to your son of different things he needs to do. So just start with a couple simple things right now that maybe create tension in that relationship currently. So they started with just one thing with an Amazon Echo. They put it in his bedroom, and at 9 a.m., he actually got a reminder that he needed to go take a shower in the morning. And that was always a battle between he and his son of getting to go take a shower in the morning. So first day comes, they've implemented the tech, they've set the reminder up for his son. 9 a.m. hits, and his dad was actually kind of hiding around the corner, waiting to see what happened, to see if the Amazon Alexa would actually work and encourage his son to go and do what it was programmed to do. So 9 a.m. comes, the Alexa provides a reminder, hey, you need to go hop in the shower. And sure enough, a few seconds later, the door to his bedroom opens. He goes right down the hall, hops in the shower, takes a shower, and eliminating that coming from a parent actually made him much more successful. They continued to build on other tasks and things, and he was much more successful in completing those independently, and eventually graduated to other forms of tech and was able to even transition later into a more independent setting. So started simple, started small, and built on that success. So keep that in mind as we talk about some of these options that, again, we're going to talk about some more high-tech solutions in a minute, but you don't have to start there. You can find a lot of success and some really simple and straightforward, again, off-the-shelf solutions as well. So again, we're going to focus on the home. So when we talk today, we're going to talk about some different examples of different tech tools that can be deployed in a lot of different ways. Things like sensor-based technology. So these are things like a sensor in the stove to know if someone has started cooking, a sensor in someone's bed to know if they're in or out of bed, a water sensor to know if you've had an overflow in the bathroom, sensors on doors, motion sensors, all kinds of different pieces of tech that are not cameras that can know when certain choices or actions happen in a home, so that you can then take some action based off of knowing that the stove has been left on for an hour or there's water on the floor in the bathroom. And we'll talk about how that works in a minute. But then there's a lot of other great technology, a lot of technologies that I know many of you may have in your home, from video doorbells or smart thermostats or smart lights and things that create just a lot of convenience for all of us. They can have a tremendous impact in the lives of people we support. And so we're going to, again, talk about the spectrum of what some of those options are here as we go throughout the rest of our time together. Also, before we talk about some of those tech tools, and I know you've had a previous presentation on remote support, but want to talk about a couple of areas of remote support specifically, again, really just to kind of make sure we're on the same page with definitions and how these things work. So when we talk about remote support is direct support. So there's we've seen some misconceptions about what is remote support. Is it, just robots or automated things, or what is it? How does it work? So remote support again is direct support provided by live people, and it is provided in conjunction with technology. And technology is really the vehicle that allows that remote support to happen. And one of the key things that we like to emphasize with both technology and remote support is the person centered application of those tools is really important. So, how that person engages with you remotely, the types of technologies that you use really need to be geared towards the preferences, the abilities of each person, because those are all going to be different. So, you can see Rashid here in the middle in this picture. He prefers a phone call. Shelly on the right, maybe she prefers audio video through a tablet. So there's different ways that that engagement can happen, and different tools that we're going to talk about here in a second that can make that possible. And again, that goes back to making sure that any kind of technology you're applying is done in a person-centered way, and not in a technology-centered way. We'll talk more in just a minute about what that means. And the final thing I want to talk about before we start getting into some examples are these three areas. So, technology supporting outcomes. And that's really where we start when we have conversations with individuals, with providers, with families, is understanding what are the concerns, what are the goals, what are the outcomes you're trying to create with technology, and how might you be providing that support right now. So think back about the example we used a minute ago, where the father and his son were, interacting to make sure that certain tasks got completed throughout the day. How they were supporting that outcome right now was the dad providing those prompts, which ended up becoming more nagging than really prompting. But that's how it's supported right now. So then, what is the outcome you're looking to achieve? Him showering successfully in the morning was one of those outcomes. So how can we use technology tools to support that outcome? So that's really the basic starting point that we have in any conversation around tech utilization. Next is remote support engagement. So not every tech utilization is going to have remote support. So when remote support is appropriate, when it's necessary, how is that going to work? What is the plan around that? And we'll talk about planning more here in a moment as well. But remote support can be an important component to helping someone successfully utilize technology and be more independent in different areas of their life. And again, quick sidebar, talking a moment ago about enabling technology and that holistic approach. While we're going to be focused on in-home applications, also think about remote support in other areas beyond the home as well. So, how can you support someone remotely or virtually on the job, being successful in the community? So, when we talk about remote support, it is not dedicated to an in-home application, although that's what we're going to focus on today, but start thinking about the ways that that could apply beyond the home as well. And then finally, technology is a natural support. So I said just a second ago, technology doesn't always have things like remote support. It's not always going to, notify someone. It's not always going to mean that someone is supported in a different way. Sometimes technology is really a natural support through prompts, through the control of an environment that really just enhances that person's ability, so that they're less reliant on other people to, do things that they want to do. So we're going to move now into talking about some different use cases and talk about some examples of people who use enabling technology in the home, use things like remote support, use tech as a natural support. So we're going to talk about a number of different scenarios to hopefully uh, make it a little more tangible for everyone around, how does this really work in real life for people who are supported with technology. So this is David. So David, if you've seen anything from Simply Home in the past, you may have heard a little bit about David's story. Phenomenal young man. David is someone who had really expressed a strong desire in his life to live more independently. He wanted his own place. And there were some areas in his life that he needed support. And, so early in that process, the planning process, the conversation was, as we talked about a moment ago, what are the outcomes in David's life that technology can play a role in supporting? And one of those areas was in cooking safely. So for David, he had some of the skills he needed to cook independently. He knew how to use the stove and do some basic cooking and recipes and things. And it's something he enjoyed doing. But there was a concern that maybe he would forget that the stove was on, or maybe he wasn't active in the kitchen for a period of time. And, so that's something that his family and his support team just wanted to make sure that he had some tools to be successful in making that happen. So, first, technology for David is a natural support. And a lot of the tools that David uses are things that helps him be successful independently, meaning they aren't things that are notifying other people on his support team, his family's not getting notified, whatever, until he's been first given the opportunity to manage that situation. So in David's home, he has sensors in a lot of different areas of his home. He has a sensor in his stove that knows when his stove is on, how long it's been on for, if he's active in the kitchen while his stove is on. And if his stove is left on for an hour, the first thing that happens is David gets a reminder. So he has a couple of speakers in his home. One is in his kitchen area and one is in his bedroom. And these speakers actually give audible prompts and reminders based off of actions that are picked up or things that don't happen as well um, in David's home so that he can get that reminder and if something needs to happen, he can go and address that situation. So David's stove's left on for an hour. He's going to get a prompt over his speaker that's going to say, David, don't forget to turn off your stove. And he's actually going to get a couple of those over a few minutes as long as his stove remains on. And what that's doing is it's allowing David the opportunity to manage that situation independently. So he gets that reminder. He knows, hey, I need to go check the stove, make sure everything's off, and get everything turned off. But the technology doesn't necessarily stop there. So David does have a team of people that remotely support him when needed. So it's just kind of on demand. And what happens is if David gets those prompts or reminders that he's left his stove on, and if he doesn't go and handle that by turning the stove off, after a period of time, a notification is then going to go to his remote support team. And now they're going to know, hey, David has left his stove on, and he's been given the opportunity to manage that because they know he has some prompts. And now they're going to receive that alert, and then they have a protocol to follow up with David. That could be, again, two-way audio video communication through a tablet in his kitchen or his home, a phone call to David. Again, think back a few slides ago where we talked about remote support and the person-centered nature of it. There's not a one-size-fits-all way that that's going to happen. And there could be, a number of different types of response that his team could be providing for him in real time to make sure that they get a hold of David and they can hopefully address that issue in real time. His team could see in real time, yep, David did turn the stove off, everything is good now. But there are some situations where maybe in-person support is needed. And so important to remember that when we talk about things like remote support and enabling technology, that what we're not talking about is removing the human component, right? There are a lot of areas of David's life where he still needs, in-person support for a variety of things. And so when we talk about tech and remote support, it's also, as a part of that planning process, thinking about how do these things complement each other? How do we take things like technology and remote support and really build that in with the other services he's receiving in his life so that they, again, complement each other and aren't conflicting with each other. So we'll just kind of talk real quickly through that whole support for David. David left his stove on. He's now gotten some prompts and reminders through the speakers in his home That could also be a phone call to him. There's a lot of different ways those prompts can happen. He doesn't engage, doesn't handle the situation. His remote support team is alerted. Now they reach out, try and help David through that situation remotely. And then if that's unsuccessful, then there is a part of David's care plan that is someone is going to respond in person to help make sure that David gets the support he needs. So that's kind of the full spectrum of how that works in David's life. So a couple of other key areas. I'm not going to spend too much longer on David, and I'll talk about a few other examples here in a moment. But technology plays a role in David's life in a variety of different areas beyond cooking. So just a couple quick examples on that. And think about the same process that we were just talking about around the way that technology operates as a natural support for David, the way that his remote support team can engage if needed, all those kinds of elements. So one area where David also receives support is in his bed. So David has a sensor in his bed that knows if he's in or out of bed. But the cool thing about the way that David's technology works is um, it, again, being in a person-centered way, that technology operates differently depending on the day of the week and the time of day. So how that works is every day of the week, if it's during the nighttime, so a nighttime window when David typically gets into bed, what happens is the technology recognizes David is getting into bed and it's during that nighttime window. And so through the speaker in his bedroom, he actually gets a prompt to remind him to put his CPAP machine on. Again, trying to help David be independent and successful in getting to bed at night. One of the things he needs to do is put his CPAP on. So his technology is there to provide that prompt in real time. That same piece of tech, a sensor in his bed, uh, works differently on weekdays in the morning. So David has a job. He needs to be up by a certain time so he can get to work on time. And so during the week, Monday through Friday, the technology is looking for David to get up by a certain time. And all those days that David gets up when his alarm clock goes off, nothing happens with the tech, right? But it's there running in the background so that those days that David, for whatever reason, maybe hits the snooze bar a few too many times or turns his alarm clock off and falls back to sleep, um, and he remains in bed, he's going to get prompts from the speaker in his bedroom again, reminding him it's time to get up. And he's going to get a couple of those over a period of a few minutes to get up. And again, if David gets up while he's getting those prompts, the technology stops, no additional alerts or reminders are sent, and now David can proceed with the rest of his morning. But let's say David doesn't do that, right? A few more minutes goes by. David has continued to ignore the prompts. Maybe he's just not feeling well, doesn't want to get out of bed, whatever that reasoning is. If he remains in bed after a period of time, now his remote support team is going to be notified. So they can check in with David, see what's going on. Maybe they need to go by. But again, David's given multiple opportunities to manage getting up independently in the morning so that he can hopefully be successful in that. And we'll talk about in just a minute the importance of reporting and being able to look at how well David is doing in achieving those goals and what that means. Again, we'll talk about that in a moment. There's a few other areas of David's life where technology, again, is a backstop from making sure he gets his medications on time, being able to press a button if he's feeling anxious or confused or just needs to talk to someone. Home safety components. So David has a video doorbell, has sensors on his door. So if the door opens at a really odd time, 2 o'clock in the morning, his support team is notified about that in real time. His video doorbell allows David to go to an iPad that he has always ready and available for him. It's actually mounted to the wall and always charging so that if somebody comes to his door, he can go right to that iPad, see who it is before he goes and opens the door, make sure he recognizes that person. And his care team can also get a notification about that. And they can make sure that everything is good in that situation. So again, a lot of different areas that David has just some really simple tools and then some really more sophisticated tools to provide support. So going to change gears a little bit and just want to talk about a couple different scenarios that we see pretty commonly. Talk about the concern or the outcome you want to support, and then we'll talk about what is the traditional way that that's supported, And then how might you start to incorporate technology to change that model slightly and maybe allow more dependence for that person? So concern here is we have an individual. Think about David. We were just talking about David. Nervous about answering the door, right? Pretty common scenario. Traditional way that may be supported is staff in the home, or maybe there isn't staff in the home, but if when staff isn't there, maybe that individual they don't want them to answer the door, right? Um, and so, how could we look at that differently, incorporating technology to create a new option for that person to manage the situation? As we just described, you could add a Ring doorbell. These are, again, simple, off the shelf, not super complicated to implement or sophisticated. Customizations or anything that happen relatively inexpensive, a couple $100 max. So affordable, simple solution. You can also integrate things like remote support. And as we just described with David, give that individual some tools where now they can check who's at the door before they actually go and answer the door. Similarly, thinking about cooking safe, we already talked about this with David a little bit, but what is the traditional support that may be, um, set up in that situation? So if we think about David, if he didn't have technology installed, maybe he needed staff in the home during those meal prep times. And if staff wasn't there, maybe it wasn't allowed for David to cook independently. So now incorporating tech, what are some different ways that tech can be utilized to create those opportunities for independence? As we talked about David, providing some prompts if the stove is left on, alerting remote support staff if it's left on. You can know in real time if it's ever even turned on, or just if that individual doesn't respond to prompts. There's a lot of different ways that can work. There's also a lot of tools out there, apps and things that can provide guidance for different recipes and safe cooking steps. And there's some apps like Life Sherpa, which is a great tool. AbleLink Technologies has another service. So these are task-based prompting apps. And one of the cool things about those is that it gives you an ability to set up customized routines. And we see this often around cooking, where different prompts can be provided for specific routines, or just again for an overall safe cooking process to help someone navigate through that. And what's really cool about it, if you haven't seen some of these apps before, is the level of customization, the really simple way using pictures that you can incorporate from that person's home, or videos, or specific audio prompts that again are tailored right to that person, right to their home, so that they are things that they recognize. It's not some YouTube video that would be confusing for them potentially. Uh, Again, you can build it right into someone's home, record little video clips and audio clips and pictures and all kinds of things to make it more engaging and specific for that individual. So a lot of different tools as it relates to cooking safely. And then thinking about how can we provide tools for someone to control their home. So if someone doesn't have the physical dexterity to open and close a door, turn a light on and off, lock the door, change the temperature in the home, or whatever other areas of their life that may limit their ability to do any of those things. How can we use tech to create that as an option for that person? And again, there's a lot of really simple off the shelf ways you can do this. There are a lot of more sophisticated, customized ways you can do this. So we have one example of a more kind of sophisticated, fully integrated smart home app that can bring in various different smart home devices, smart lights and thermostats, and you name it, all kinds of different devices into a single place to allow for control. And that control, again, can be built out in a lot of different ways. So you can have really big images, you can have pictures, you can have colors. So, we have thermostats displayed here using like a scroll wheel. But for some individuals, that may not be appropriate. Maybe you have individuals who maybe they don't have the ability to read, or maybe they don't have fine motor skills to be able to do that. So there are ways you can actually build out an app like this so that you use really, really big buttons. And maybe you use a red up arrow and a blue down arrow to signify increasing or decreasing the temperature in the home to, again, build the tools based off of the abilities and the preferences of each person, which is one of the limiting things that we often see from some of the off the shelf solutions. While they can provide a lot of utility for many people, it's not going to reach everyone. And so um, just know that there are some options out there so that if some of those off the shelf smart thermostats or whatever that tech tool is doesn't work because of the abilities of that person or the preferences of that person, there are ways to overcome that. The integration of things like voice control, customized apps like this one, um, you know, just a lot of different ways that you can really build that around the person instead of just taking the tech itself and hoping for the best, right? So these things can be customized. And again, think back to the spectrum we talked about at the beginning. For some people, that basic off the shelf is going to be all they need. For other people, that more customized approach is going to be necessary. So we talked a lot about examples and different ways that technology can be applied. But something that's really important for us to think about is the process that is necessary for implementing and integrating technology for an individual. So, um, and while we talk about the spectrum at the beginning and throughout this presentation, um, this technology integration process is really important to think about across the board. So whether you're doing something really, really simple or you're doing whole home automation and something really sophisticated and customized, this process is going to be the same regardless. And I would highly encourage you to not skip this process just because you think, oh, we just got this piece of tech from Amazon. It's really simple. It's really basic. We're just going to put it in and kind of skip this training or excuse me, this planning process, regardless of whether you have something that you think is really simple or really complex. Doesn't matter. This process and following a process like this is really important to overall success. So going from identifying a person who could benefit from technology, we'll just kind of navigate through these steps quickly here. So we identify a person who has some areas in their life where we think technology can create some outcomes that are positive, create opportunities for independence. What is that going to look like in terms of navigating the next steps? So completing an assessment with a technology vendor or your own internal team. So if you have gone through some training, education with your team, and you have now some tech champions and experts within your organization, I know that there are some providers like that in South Carolina and in other areas of the country, which is fantastic. So if you have internal people who can facilitate that assessment process, that's great too. But completing an assessment is really important, making sure you understand what are the tech tools we're going to use, what outcomes will this tech create, and then build off of that. So once you've done an assessment, you've identified the right tech tools for that particular situation. Now it needs to be built into a transition plan. So this is an often overlooked step in the process. We see time and time again a tech option and tech tool identified. Someone wants to use, like, let's say that Amazon Echo we started out talking about. You have to slowly build on these things, right? When I gave that example and we talked about the one thing that they started with, right? Helping to provide that prompt about taking a shower in the morning, right? If they would have gone in and built out 75 different reminders and prompts throughout the day, it would have been overwhelming, right? And so starting small is really important and thinking about how are we going to fade this technology into this person's life to make it as successful as possible, and just take those small steps and build on them is really key to overall success. Now, for some people, that's going to be pretty rapid and pretty fast. For other people, it may be a little bit more deliberate and take, you know, a longer period of time. But thinking about that plan and how that's going to roll out before you implement the tech is really key to success. Obviously, training is key too, both for the person supported and anyone on that person's support team, so that they understand why is tech being used. Again, that's an area that we often see gaps. And if people don't understand the why with tech utilization, uh, we see a lot of pushback and a lot of, I hate to say it this way, but really kind of undermining the success of that technology. And it's just because they don't understand why it's being used. And so having those conversations on the front end as technology is being implemented so that everyone understands the why behind tech and they don't see it as a threat. They don't see it as, something negative. They really understand the positive outcomes that you're trying to achieve for the person. And that will uh, create a more successful situation. And all of that is before anything changes in how you're supporting that person, right? So thinking about the transitioning of technology in is really important, but also thinking about the ramifications of that after technologies are fully integrated in terms of how you're supporting that person is really key too. So um, what we highly recommend people, organizations, families, whoever it is, working with technology is the more you can make that process, again, thoughtful and deliberate as much as possible, the more successful it's going to be. So we don't recommend you just go get some technology, put it in, and change the way that person's reported overnight. That's just going to be too much chaos at once. So think about the transitioning of technology in. If you're going to change the way you support that person as a result of tech utilization, do that in a thoughtful transition process too. And finally, want to just touch on the importance of collecting information, collecting data as it relates to the outcomes for each person. So, I'm just going to go back and use some of the examples that we set out with David earlier. So, if we just talk about David getting up independently in the morning, so that's one of David's goals in his life is to get up independently and not rely on anyone else to be there and help get him up in the morning and help get him going for the day. But how do we really know if David is being successful if we don't have data, right? Otherwise, if we didn't have data, it would just be anecdotal, right? It would just be based on stories or feelings about what may or may not be happening, which may not actually match reality. But when we have technology in place and things like the sensor in David's bed and the prompts and reminders and the alerts for David, we can now see using that data uh, how often is David getting up completely independently without even the natural support of technology. So, meaning David got up on time, his alarm clock went off, he got up, got going for the day, right? He didn't have any additional prompts or reminders, and that's his goal, right? So we can now see throughout an entire month, David didn't get any reminders, and his support team wasn't notified, right? So David's being really successful in that goal, right? Conversely, we can also see if every day David is having to get prompts from his technology. He's getting reminders over his speaker that say, "Hey, David, it's time to get up." If that's happening every day, and maybe he's even ignoring that, and his support team's being alerted, and they're having to, drop in and engage with David on a daily basis. Well, David is not being very successful in achieving that goal. And maybe there's some additional training that David needs. Maybe he needs to be supported in a different way. Whatever the case may be, you can't make those decisions and understand the next steps you need to take without knowing the data of what's really happening. So being able to collect that information and report on it is really important. And so think about how are we going to collect the information? How are we going to show success in this situation? How are we going to show goal achievement? Those kinds of things are really important. And with some tech tools, maybe it's in some ways you're supporting someone, maybe it's not as important. And in other situations, it may be vitally important to have that information. So just think about that in the front end planning process of what is the data collection and reporting going to look like for this person, um, so that you can just be prepared for that on the front end. So a couple key points to remember as we wrap up here. I know we've got about 20 minutes left. So if you have any of those questions, feel free to get those going. But just want to summarize a couple of things before we jump into that. So first of all, remember to focus on the outcomes. We, use that buzzword out or buzz term that's out, person-centered processes, which is so key to success in tech utilization. So focus on the outcomes for the person and not the shiny objects. We unfortunately do see sometimes where families or providers go see something that's really cool. And there's a lot out there in the technology space that's really cool. But what happens is that becomes a solution in search of a problem, as opposed to really understanding the goals of that person, the outcomes you want to achieve with tech, and then finding the right technology tools. So, as cool as some of those technologies are, remember to focus on the outcomes in that person's life. And also remember the spectrum of technology options, right? Remember the first example we talked about. We could have built out a whole customized app and recommended they go, use a service like Life Sherpa to, help that young man navigate his entire morning routine successfully. But that was a little too much at that time, right? So remember, you can start small with something like an Amazon Echo, 40, $50, and find some success. Also, the importance of planning, right? In every situation, there are going to be what ifs. I know I've heard Dr. Bernard from Charles Lee Center, who I know is on here. I've heard him talk about this a number of times. All the what if scenarios come up. And the challenge I would have for everyone when we talk about technology and the planning process is, all those what ifs can really, throw brakes on the process for using any kind of technology. But if you think about it in a larger context of any person that you support in any way, there are always what ifs. There are what ifs of, hey, we're providing transportation for someone. What if the car breaks down? We're providing in-person staff for the person. What if staff doesn't show up, right? There are always what ifs when we're supporting someone. And, through, all of the experience that we've had in this world, we've developed answers for all those what if scenarios. Or what if the car breaks down? What if staff doesn't show up? And technology is new in many cases, and so sometimes we don't have answers readily available for some of those what ifs, and we have to go and design them, and that poses some new challenges. It doesn't mean that you can't answer those what ifs. It just means they're new what ifs. So just think about that in that context and recognize that, again, every situation is generally going to have some what ifs. It just means you may have some new what ifs. Again, a few more things to think about. Using technology is not all or none. You don't have to jump right in the deep end. Take small steps to success. Just get the process going. Figure out where you want to start from and take that first step. Also, you don't have to be a tech expert. There are a lot of great vendors in different areas of, in-home tech supports to, on the job, being successful in the community, whatever area of life. That's one of the great things that has happened over the past, 6, 8, 10 years in this industry. The number of options that exist out there have exploded. So go talk to people who work in this industry, figure out what are the options that are out there. Talk to other providers who may be farther along and see what are they doing, how are they doing it, and learn from that. Also, think about technology as a natural support. We talked about that in a few different scenarios. So think about the role that technology can have in supporting individuals directly. It doesn't always have to be things like remote support or someone external engaging with technology. Sometimes it's just something as simple as, again, a video doorbell, an Amazon Echo, those kinds of things. And can't stress the importance of planning, education, training, and communication. I just can't stress it enough. So think about that as a part of your overall process, and make sure that you incorporate that with everything you do. So we're right at the 45-minute mark, and want to take a breather here and see what questions you all have. We can dig into it from there.
So, Jason, thank you for the presentation. I guess a question, if I could start us off, that I have is, I know that you guys do work in multiple states. Which states do you think are doing a good job funding in-home supports, and so that we could look to them for some, as we move forward with that in South Carolina? Any states doing a good job there?
When you say in-home supports, are you referring to technology in the home and things like remote support?
Yeah, I would say I'm looking for in-home supports for people that maybe keep them from in their current living situation versus needing residential supports. Anything that a funding mechanism for that.
Got it. Got it. So a couple states I would look to. Obviously, Tennessee is one that comes to mind. Um, Missouri has done some really interesting things, and Pennsylvania. So if I were going to go look, I would look at those three states. They have some all have their own unique ways that they have looked at how they address that, and that's been not just a state by state thing, but also um, looking at different population groups. So doing things for like transition age youth. Um, Tennessee has a program called the MAPS program as an example. So I would say, look at not just the variety of ways that states have done that, but even within each one of those states, there are typically a couple different programs that address that in-home support need in a couple different ways. And technology in all three of those states is a part of that process too. They have options for it.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, guys, so I don't see any other questions in our Q&A at the moment.
I've got a
Um,
question real quickly.
Go ahead.
Quick question, maybe. One of the things that I think some folks are trying to figure out is when they're trying to find vendors, to assist with some of this development, where can they find them? How do you find these vendors? And then the second thing is, and you and I have talked about that a little bit, is what would you recommend as far as a process for vetting vendors in terms of making sure that you're getting a vendor that is going to meet what you need, and that you feel that that's a good match. I mean, what kind of recommendations would you give in that regard?
Great questions, Jerry. Thank you. So there's a couple different things I would recommend on vendors. So there are a handful of online resources that are kind of like a database of options out there as it relates to technology. So the ARC has one. It's called the ARC Tech Toolbox. So if you want to search for that online, uh, you can go and search by different areas of need, settings, and it's going to provide you back some different options for different technology vendors based off of those criteria. Tennessee rolled out a very similar program. I believe it's called, don't quote me on this, but it is posted on their website. I think it's called Tennessee Tech Pathfinders, if I'm not mistaken. And very similar, like you can go in and search for area of need. You can search for different, service settings. The one thing that's a little bit different with that is it's going to ask for things like, what county in Tennessee are you looking for services in, because it's, dedicated to their state. But you can just put in all, and it's going to give you back a list of vendors and things. And so there's some resources out there like that that have some good options where you can just go online and search. Um, Additionally, I would encourage people to go to some conferences. So I know that there are conferences both specific to the state of South Carolina, but there are also some regional and national conferences that are specifically focusing on tech, where there are vendors who are, there with booths and, giving talks and that sort of thing, where you can learn more about different tech options. I would encourage people to talk to other providers who are using technology and understand who are they using, how does it work, that sort of thing. So those are some ideas in terms of just seeing what is available in the market. And then in terms of the process for vetting vendors, depending on the type of technology options you're looking for, there are some slight variances in this. But when we were doing work with the state of Tennessee, we did put together a checklist, and I'm pretty sure it's available on their website. Um, if it's not, I can send it over to Susan and Jason and you, and you can distribute that. But there's a checklist for vetting vendors, and obviously, you want to make sure that people have experience and they're reputable. There's some different tech specific things that you're going to want to get more information from that vendor on, things like security around information and data, storage, all that kind of stuff. Um, so, having that process is really important so that, you can understand what are we doing, and, do we have partners that, are kind of meeting the criteria that we have, again, for things like security and access to information. And then along with those checklists, which are great, I would encourage you to have conversations with some of those vendors to really get an understanding of their ability and their desire to partner with you as an organization. And, remembering that, this is human services, right? And you are tasked with a lot of responsibility in supporting individuals that you care for. And you want to find partners in that process that are going to support you, understand the populations that you're working with, and not all technology organizations have that background, have that understanding. So I would not just focus on the tech. I would have some conversations to get an understanding of their understanding of the industry, and really how they're going to partner with you as an organization to make you successful.
Thank you for that. We do have one question in our Q&A. Jason, so I'd like to pose that one to you, and that may be our last one, but says, my concern would be the maintenance on the software and devices after the warranty. What are your recommendations on that?
Great question, Amanda. Thank you for hopping in. So that's always it's a tricky situation, right? Because when you look at acquiring devices, and particularly if someone has a dedicated budget for that, they may not have funds readily available to buy new tech every year, or things like that. And that's going to depend a little bit. And I hate not having like a more definitive answer for you, but it does depend a little bit on the vendor and the technologies that you're working with. I know many vendors in this space, things like software updates are a part of the service that they provide. Not every, it's particularly when you think about some of the off-the-shelf solutions. There are often with different tech solutions, again, both off-the-shelf and more customized solutions, things like monthly or annual service costs. And so that's also something to think about. While it's a cost and something you need to be mindful of, there's also a benefit to it. The benefit being things like regular updates are generally provided when you have a subscription service like that. So for some things that are like a one-time cost, you bought off of Amazon or something, and it may have a 1-year product warranty on it, and 3 years down the road, something happens, that device is no longer functional, needs an update, whatever it is, that would be a different story. And there isn't a great answer for that. It may be that you have to, spend some additional money at that time to make that update or replace that particular product. But did just want to, put it out there and at least make it a part of your thought process that there are a lot of products and services from sensor systems to medication dispensing devices to, whatever that solution is. Even some of those apps that we talked about for reminders and prompts to help someone like, with a recipe or morning routine or whatever it is, those things typically have an ongoing maintenance cost to them. Again, either monthly or annually that that covers things like that. But yeah, that's what I would be thinking about.
Okay, thank you again, Jason, for the time today and for the presentation. Very helpful to our team here. So we will conclude today, but before we do that, I would like to, of course, thank you all for your attendance today. I'd like to remind you that our next webinar will be December 10th. Our title that day will be Enabling Technology Inclusion, My Home, My Health, My Privacy, and the focus will be telehealth. So if you're interested in that topic, love for you to join us that day. There will be a registration link coming out 2 weeks before that webinar. So to all of you, thank you. And to Jason Ray again, thank you for your time today. That concludes our webinar. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.